I want to take about 3 minutes and help you kind of start into a reflection on and maybe a discussion of Matthew chapter 23, the entire chapter. This is one of those passages of Scripture, one of those chapters that we find difficult to process, to understand. What kind of frame of reference do we bring to it? The ancient Hebrews, the ancient Jewish people, at least had the context of the Old Testament prophet who would come speaking against the kings, speaking against the priests who were not representing God the way he wanted to be represented. John the Baptist came in similar manner, and here we see Jesus taking on the mantle of a prophet and speaking with this kind of authority and this kind of critique of the scribes and the Pharisees. We struggle to understand it. Maybe it's because of our modern ear, our modern sensibilities. Maybe it's because we're Canadian, or maybe it's because we're not online on social media, or we're not in politics, because sometimes we bring some pretty harsh criticisms, or we hear and read pretty harsh criticisms in those places. But if you read through the entire chapter, you'll discover that Jesus initially speaks to the crowds and brings his instruction to them. Secondly, he then turns and brings his correction, a public rebuke, to the scribes and the Pharisees. It's a series of woes. Woe to you hypocrites, 6 times he uses the word hypocrite. Woe to you blind guides, blind fools, blind men. He even calls them snakes and brood of vipers. I mean, these are harsh words that Jesus is using. And it does even kind of provoke the wonder. How is it that Jesus knew what was going on in the hearts of these individuals? And then Jesus takes us to this response, starting at verse 37. That is a lament over Jerusalem. It's a cry, a plea. It's sorrow being expressed as he says, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I longed to gather you, your children together." And we're given some permission to weep over the things that we ought to be weeping about in our world. Maybe it's in your own life. Certainly in the brokenness that is manifest on the news, or maybe it's recent events, families in our community that have been terribly impacted. There's real and genuine sorrow for the things that go on in our world. And Jesus models that for us, that we can find expression, maybe drawing from the Psalms, drawing from the book of Lamentations, these examples of where it's appropriate to cry out to God. Read through this. How does your heart break as you encounter some of the things Jesus says? What kind of self-critique is appropriate? For those of us who are teachers, clearly this is directed squarely at us. And the command to be sincere, to be genuine, that hypocrisy would not find place among us in any way, shape, or form. Pray for your pastors, your teachers, on this point, that we would hear God and be soft and tender toward God regularly, that you, too, would be soft and tender toward God. Bless you as you open Scripture today.